My name is Dana Holloway. I'm 44 years old. And for most of my adult life, I believed my mother was the person who kept our family from falling apart. I was wrong. She was the person who kept making sure something was always falling apart. I didn't understand that until the summer my son graduated from high school and refused to cancel a trip he had been planning since sophomore year. He had saved for it himself, mapped every stop, practiced emergency drills, and built part of his college scholarship application around the project. My mother knew all of that. She also knew my younger sister had a 5-day training program for a promotion and needed childcare. What none of us knew was that Mom had already solved the childcare problem months earlier. Then she quietly unsolved it. By the time we discovered that, she had told my sister that my son had volunteered to watch the kids. She had told half the family he was backing out. She had told people I was encouraging him to abandon his cousins. And when guilt didn't make him surrender, she tried something more dramatic in front of nearly 50 people at his graduation cookout. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why it worked for as long as it did, you need to understand the kind of daughter I had trained myself to be. I'm a respiratory therapist at a large hospital outside Madison, Wisconsin. I work 3 long shifts a week, most of them nights. My husband, Grant, teaches auto technology at a technical college, and our son, Jonah, is 18. He is not loud. He doesn't win arguments by wearing people down. He thinks first, writes things down, and often waits so long to speak that people mistake his silence for agreement. That mistake had protected my mother for years. Her name is Lorraine Keene. She is 70, widowed, socially polished, and fiercely competent. She spent most of her career managing events for a university alumni office. She also knew exactly which sentence would make each member of our family abandon whatever we were doing and turn toward her. With me, it was usually medical. The first time I really should have understood was Jonah's 17th birthday. We had rented 2 lanes at a bowling alley because Jonah hates big parties and loves anything that can be turned into a score sheet. Grant had ordered pizza. 4 of Jonah's friends were there. I had just carried a lopsided chocolate cake from the concession counter when my phone vibrated. It was Mom. I almost ignored it, almost. Then I saw 3 missed calls stacked under her name. When I answered, she sounded breathless. She said she had been climbing the basement stairs when her vision blurred. She felt pressure under her ribs. Her fingers were tingling. She didn't want to bother anyone, of course. She said that part twice. I was already reaching for my coat. Grant watched me from across the lane. He didn't argue. He had stopped arguing about my mother years earlier because every discussion ended with me saying the same thing. What if this is the one time it's real? I drove to her condo, checked her vital signs, and took her to the hospital when she refused an ambulance. 4 hours later, after a normal workup and a physician suggesting dehydration and anxiety, I sat in the parking structure and watched a video Grant had sent me. Jonah was holding the plastic bowling alley knife over the cake. Everyone was singing. There was an empty chair beside Grant. Jonah blew out the candles, looked toward that chair for half a second, and smiled before the video ended. When I got home, his friends were gone. He was in the kitchen eating leftover pizza, straight from the refrigerator. "I'm sorry," I told him. He shrugged. Grandma okay? Yes. Good. Then he closed the refrigerator door and said, She usually is. I remember the sentence because something in me reacted before my mind did. A tiny defensive spark. Jonah. I didn't say anything bad. No, but you said it like it keeps happening. He looked genuinely confused, not rebellious. That made it worse. I told him his grandmother was older, that symptoms were complicated, that family had to take care of one another. He nodded and let me finish. I thought I had corrected him. What I had actually done was teach him that I preferred the family story to the evidence in front of us. He never mentioned it again. At least, not to me. My father, Russell Keene, had died 7 years earlier after a fast-moving pancreatic cancer. Before he got sick, my parents had a busy social life. They traveled with another couple, hosted holiday dinners, volunteered at their church pantry, and spent entire Saturdays driving to antique markets my mother pretended to hate and secretly loved. My father was the easy one. He called people for no reason. He dropped off soup without keeping score. If Mom got offended because somebody missed Easter brunch, Dad could usually make her laugh before the resentment. T hardened. When he died, the noise around her stopped. At first, all of us rushed in. Tessa stayed at the condo. I handled appointments, Grant fixed things, and friends filled the freezer. Then life restarted for everyone except Mom. She was lonely and grieving. After 45 years as part of a pair, she experienced the growing silence around her as abandonment. I can understand that now without turning it into an excuse. And somewhere inside that grief, she discovered that ordinary loneliness did not bring people running. Problems did. A leaking disposal brought Grant with his tools. A dizzy spell brought me. A banking problem brought Tessa. A rumor about a cousin brought 3 phone calls in one afternoon. Nothing happened all at once. There was no moment when my mother announced that she was going to manipulate her daughters into orbiting her. It was smaller than that. She learned what worked. And we rewarded every lesson. By the following spring, Jonah's graduation had become the bright fixed point in our house. He had been accepted to a state university in Minnesota to study environmental engineering, but tuition still left a gap we couldn't comfortably cover. He was also one of 12 finalists for a renewable scholarship offered by a regional water resources foundation. His application project was unusual enough that his school counselor had encouraged him to build the whole essay around it. For almost 2 years, Jonah and 3 friends had been planning an 8-day canoe route through the Boundary Waters. Not a guided trip, not a resort weekend. They had researched permits, weather patterns, portage distances, food weight, water filtration, emergency exits, and how much gear 4 teenagers could realistically carry without hating one another by day 3. Jonah worked weekends at a bicycle repair shop called Northline Cycles. Every paycheck, he put a fixed amount into an envelope in the back of his desk drawer. By May, he had saved a little over $2,000. A laminated route card hung above his desk. Grant had checked his gear. I had lectured him about hypothermia. The trip ran June 18 through June 25, 5 days before his scholarship interview. His application centered on planning and completing the expedition, So the trip was not merely recreation. It was evidence of how he thought. Everyone knew the dates, including my mother. My sister Tessa lived in Janesville, about 45 minutes south of us, with her 2 children, 9-year-old Ren and 5-year-old Caleb. Her marriage had ended 2 years earlier. Her ex-husband had moved to Arizona and was inconsistent enough that any plan involving his parenting time required a backup plan for the backup plan. Tessa worked as an account coordinator for a commercial construction firm. That spring, her manager offered her a path into project management, which would mean a meaningful raise and better hours. The catch was a mandatory certification seminar in Milwaukee from June 20 through June 24. She needed childcare from early Monday morning through Friday afternoon. This should have been manageable. In January, Tessa enrolled both children in a week-long outdoor day program at a nature center near her apartment. The program opened at 7:30, closed at 5:30, and offered late pickup for an extra fee. Tessa paid the deposit and sent Mom a picture of Ren modeling the green camp t-shirt when it arrived. I didn't know any of that at the time. That was another thing. My mother had changed without anyone noticing. Tessa and I used to talk constantly. In our 20s, we called each other from grocery store aisles. We knew which coworker was irritating the other, which child had a fever, which bill had surprised us, which marriage argument was serious, and which one would be funny tomorrow. Then Dad died, and Mom became the central dispatcher. Tessa's overwhelmed. Don't call tonight. Dana's sleeping after work. Leave her alone. Your sister sounded irritated when I mentioned your name. She didn't say anything exactly, but I can tell. The messages were always small enough to seem protective. Over time, direct contact between Tessa and me became less frequent. If I wanted to know how her custody hearing went, Mom already knew. If Tessa wanted to know whether Jonah had chosen a college, Mom had already told her. We thought she was keeping us connected. In reality, she had positioned herself where every piece of information had to pass through her hands. The call that broke the system came on a Wednesday afternoon in late May. I was standing in our laundry room, matching socks when Mom called. She sounded cheerful. "Good, it's settled," she said. I asked what was settled. "Tessa's training. Jonah will stay at her place with the kids that week." I stopped folding. What week? Her Milwaukee program, June 20th through the 24th. For a second, I thought I had misheard. Joe. Now we'll be in northern Minnesota. Mom gave a short sigh, as though I had introduced an unnecessary complication into a meeting that was already over. Oh, Dana, that canoe thing. I looked toward the hallway. Jonah's route card was visible through his open bedroom door. Yes, that canoe thing. The trip he's been planning for almost 2 years. Well, plans change. No, not these plans. Her tone changed by half a degree. Tessa has a career opportunity. 2 little children need an adult. Jonah is 18. He's also leaving on the 18th. He can go another time. He has permits. His friends have permits. They've paid for equipment. His scholarship interview is 5 days after they get back. Mom went quiet. Then she said, I already told Tessa he would do it. The sentence, landed harder than the request. You told her what? That he'd help. She was panicking. I told her family would handle it. Did Jonah tell you he would? Another pause. Not confusion. Calculation. I know my grandson. That isn't what I asked. Dana, don't turn this into some legal deposition. I heard the back door open. Jonah came in from work wearing a navy Northline Cycles shirt with grease on one forearm. He saw my face, set his keys down, and stayed where he was. Mom kept talking. You and Grant have raised a good boy. A good boy does not paddle around lakes while his aunt risks losing a promotion. Jonah held out his hand. I hesitated. That hesitation embarrassed me later. I was afraid of what would happen if my son spoke to my mother, without the layer of cushioning I had provided all his life. He took the phone anyway. Grandma. Her voice immediately softened. I could hear it from where I stood. Jonah, sweetheart, I'm glad you're there. We just need you to be flexible. He leaned against the washing machine. I can help Aunt Tessa before I leave. I can help after I get back. I can even pay part of a sitter from my trip money if she's really stuck. I stared at him. He had not told me that part. But I'm not canceling the trip, he continued. So if that's what you're asking, the answer is no. Silence. Jonah waited. Mom said, you're choosing a vacation over family. No, I'm choosing not to cancel something I committed to because someone else made a promise for me. His voice was respectful, almost painfully respectful. That made the sentence sharper. Mom said, you'll understand when you're older. Maybe. You could disappoint a lot of people. I know. And you're comfortable with that. Jonah looked at me. No, he said. I'm uncomfortable. I'm still not canceling. That was the moment I felt the room change. Not because he had been cruel. Because he had discovered something I had avoided for decades. A boundary does not require the other person to agree that it is reasonable. He handed the phone back to me. Mom said only, I hope you're proud of what you're teaching him. Then she hung up. I stood in the laundry room with a warm sock in one hand and the phone in the other. Jonah picked up his keys again. Was that bad? I opened my mouth to say what I had always said. She's your grandmother. She means well. You could have softened it. Instead, I heard Grant's voice from months earlier, when Mom had called me out of a movie because her garage door wouldn't close, and we arrived to find it functioning perfectly. He had said very quietly, Dana, you are always grading your response. Has anyone ever graded the request? So I looked at my son and said, no, it wasn't bad. He nodded once and went upstairs. 2 days later, the family campaign began. My Aunt Joyce called, then a cousin. Even Mom's neighbor left a voicemail. The story was identical everywhere. Jonah had volunteered, Tessa had relied on him, and then he had changed his mind. I corrected people until I could hear how useless my corrections sounded. He never volunteered. That's not what I heard. He found out about the childcare problem during the same phone call I did. Well, Lorraine says. Lorraine says. Lorraine heard. Lorraine explained. Lorraine knows. By Sunday night, one person still hadn't called me. Tessa. That frightened me more than the others. Because when my sister finally did call, I understood why. She didn't say hello. She said, "What is going on with Jonah?" I sat down at the edge of our bed. "What did Mom tell you?" "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this about Mom." Jonah offered. She told me weeks ago he offered. I canceled 2 other possibilities because I thought I was covered. My stomach tightened. Tessa, I need you to listen carefully. Jonah did not know you needed childcare until Wednesday. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. That's impossible. He was standing in my laundry room when Mom told me the dates. He heard about it with me. No. Yes. Dana, she said he brought it up. She said he was excited. To help. She said he wanted the kids to think of it like a cousin's sleepover. I closed my eyes. Those details were so specific that for one insane second, I doubted my own memory. That was Mom's real talent. She didn't tell vague lies. She furnished them. Tessa, put the anger aside for 30 seconds. Did Jonah ever call you? No. Text you? No. Did you ever speak to him directly about that week? She didn't answer. I could hear one of the kids in the background asking for a snack. Finally, she said, "Mom handled it." There it was. 3 words that explained 10 years of our family. Mom handled it. I asked Tessa what she meant when she said she had canceled other possibilities. That question changed everything. She told me about the nature program. Back in January, she had registered Ren and Caleb for the exact week of her Milwaukee training. In March, the center emailed to confirm the reservation. In April, she received a refund for the deposit, but she had missed it in a month full of legal fees and school expenses. A few days later, Mom told her the program had called and said they were overbooked. Tessa had believed her. Why would the center call Mom? I asked. Because I put her down as an authorized pickup and emergency contact. Did they call you? I don't remember. Mom said they had a staffing problem. Did you ever see the email? Silence. No. Call them tomorrow. Tessa got defensive immediately. You think Mom canceled it. I don't know what I think. You obviously do. I think we have spent years accepting information from one person and calling it communication. That hurt her. I heard it happen. Wow, she said. So now I'm stupid. No, I'm saying I did the same thing. You always think you're the calm one. That isn't what I said. It's what you mean. For a few minutes, we fell into an argument so old I could have performed both sides from memory. Then I stopped because I heard phrases that did not sound like either of us. Mom says you think. Mom told me you always. Mom said not to ask because. We both went quiet. Tessa spoke first. Dana, when did you start thinking I resented you for having Grant? I blinked. What? She told me you knew I was jealous because my marriage ended. I have never thought that. She said you didn't want me around much because I made things awkward. I stood up and walked to the window, though there was nothing outside to see except our dark driveway. Tessa, she told me you stopped visiting because Grant made you uncomfortable. What? She said you felt judged by us. That is not true. I know that now. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. Then Tessa whispered, "Call me tomorrow after I talk to the nature center." The next morning, she called at 8:12. I remember the time because I had just gotten home from a night shift and was still wearing hospital shoes. Her voice sounded scraped raw. The cancellation request came through the family account. I sat at the kitchen table. What does that mean? When I signed the kids up, Mom helped me because I was on a work call. I gave her my login. She used her tablet to finish the forms. I waited. The center keeps an activity log. The reservation was canceled April 9th at 6:43 in the morning. The login came from a device they'd seen before. Her tablet. They can't tell me that, but they can tell me the browser and device type. It matches what she uses. Could it have been you? I was in Chicago that morning for a custody hearing. My skin prickled. Tessa continued. And there's more. I called Nina. Nina was a retired teacher who lived 2 floors below Tessa and occasionally watched the children after school. She said Mom called her around the same time, told her I had the whole June week covered with family and didn't want to impose. Nina said she would have taken the kids at least 2 days. She thought she was helping by backing off. I pressed my palm against the table. 2 separate safety nets had disappeared. Not by accident. Not in response to a crisis. Before the crisis existed. Why? I said. Tessa made a broken sound. I don't know. But I did. I didn't want to know it yet, but I did. Mom had spent years saying that our family would collapse if she stopped organizing everyone. What if, somewhere along the way, she had started creating the collapses? I slept for 3 hours that morning and woke from a dream in which my phone was ringing from inside a wall. At lunch, Grant found me at the kitchen counter with a legal pad. I had made columns. Date. Emergency. Who responded? What changed? What proof existed afterward? He read the page without comment. Say it, I told him. I don't know what to say. You've thought something for years. He pulled out a chair. Yes. How long? Dana. How long? Since the furnace. That had been tea. 3 winters earlier. Mom called us at 1 in the morning because she smelled gas near the utility closet. We drove over. Grant shut everything down, opened windows, checked the area, and called the emergency utility line. No leak. The technician found nothing. The next morning, Mom told everyone Grant had saved her life. I had thought she was being grateful. Grant had noticed something else. The furnace had been serviced 2 days earlier, he said now. The inspection tag was still hanging from it. She never mentioned that. I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? I did. I started to object. Then I remembered. He had said the whole thing felt strange. I had accused him of being impatient with a grieving widow. The memory made my face burn. He reached across the table. I stopped because every time I questioned the emergency, you heard me questioning whether you loved your mother. That sentence hurt more than any accusation could have. Because it was true. For years, Mom had fused obedience with love so thoroughly that even I could no longer tell where one ended. That afternoon, Jonah came home and saw the legal pad. He looked at it for less than a second before his expression changed. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." "No, that was something." He put his backpack down. "Are you making a list?" "Yes." He stood very still. Then he said, "I already have one." He went upstairs and came back with an old spiral notebook. Not a phone note. Not a spreadsheet. A paper notebook with a cracked green cover. He sat across from me and opened it. The first entry was 4 years old. Then came my birthday, Jonah's winter concert, Thanksgiving, my anniversary, one of Tessa's custody meetings, and the bowling party. Beside each date, Jonah had recorded what Mom claimed and what happened after someone reached her. He had even noted how often the problem disappeared once she had company. I felt sick. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was 14. "Why?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I thought maybe I was being mean." That answer broke something open in me. He had not made the notebook to prosecute his grandmother. He had made it to check his own reality. "When I got annoyed," he said, "you always had a reason why I shouldn't be, so I started writing down what happened. I wanted to see if I was remembering it wrong." I couldn't speak. He kept going, carefully, because that is what my son does when he thinks someone else might break under the weight of a fact. Some things were real. Her wrist was actually fractured that one time, and when she had pneumonia, she was really sick. I know that. "Jonah, I'm not saying everything is fake." "I know. I just think she knows that if she says she's lonely, people might be busy. If she says something is wrong, nobody gets to be busy. There are sentences that arrive years before you are ready for them." That was one. I closed the notebook. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For making you collect evidence before you were allowed to trust your own feelings." He looked uncomfortable. "Mom, I'm fine." "No, you're functioning, that's different." He gave me the smallest smile. "You sound like you're hospital training." "I'm serious." "I know." Then his face changed again. "There's something else." My heart accelerated. "What?" "Not proof exactly." He took out his phone. 3 weeks earlier, Mom had sent him a message after he mentioned the canoe trip in the family chat. At the time, I had never seen it. The text was not openly cruel. That would have been easier. It was affectionate. She told him she admired his independence. She said his grandfather would have loved the trip. Then she wrote that adulthood meant learning when personal plans had to bend for people who depended on you. At the bottom, she added, "You'll make the right choice when the time comes." The message had been sent in early May. Before Mom had supposedly learned Tessa was desperate. Before she told Tessa that Jonah had volunteered. I read it twice. "She knew," I said. Jonah nodded. "She was setting it up." Maybe. Why didn't you show me? Because you would have said she was just being grandma. I put his phone down. He was right again. That week, Tessa and I stopped using Mom as an information source. It felt almost embarrassingly simple. We called each other. Directly. The first calls were awkward. We had lost the habit and kept discovering things we had supposedly said about each other that neither of us remembered saying. Then Tessa laughed about a ridiculous claim that I hated her Christmas cinnamon rolls. I had once asked for the recipe. That was how our relationship came back, not through one dramatic reconciliation, but through dozens of small corrections. The truth was not always devastating. Sometimes it was just ordinary. And ordinary turned out to be what my mother could not control. Mom noticed change before we told her anything. Of course she did. For years, information had flowed toward her automatically. Now she would ask me how Tessa was doing, and I would say, "You should ask Tessa." She would tell Tessa that Jonah seemed stressed, and Tessa would answer, "I'll text Jonah." The first time I did it, Mom laughed. The second time, she became offended. By the fifth time, she stopped pretending not to understand. "You two are freezing me out." "No one is freezing you out. I'm your mother. I shouldn't have to make appointments for basic information." I almost laughed at the wording. Appointments. As though access to our lives had been a standing entitlement. Instead, I said, "We're talking directly. That isn't about you." Everything with Mom was about her if it reduced her importance. A week before graduation, she drove to Northline Cycles while Jonah was working. His manager, a woman named Priya Shah, told me about it later because she was worried Jonah might be dealing with a family situation that could affect his schedule. Mom bought a bottle of Chain lubricant she did not need and waited until Jonah was alone at the service counter. Then she handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for $800. "Use this to reschedule your trip," she told him. Jonah pushed the check back across the counter. "I'm not rescheduling. I'm trying to make this easy. It's already simple. Simple. I'm going." Mom lowered her voice. "Your aunt may lose a promotion. She has childcare now." That was true. Grant and I had offered to cover 2 days. Nina could take one. Tessa's co-worker and her partner had offered the remaining 2 afternoons. A friend from Ren's soccer team volunteered for morning drop-offs. It wasn't elegant. It was community. The kind of help that appears when people are allowed to know the truth. Mom stared at Jonah. "Your mother has been busy." "She's helping." "She is humiliating me." Jonah frowned. "How?" "By making it look as though I created a problem." He said nothing. Mom leaned closer. "I have done more for that family than you will ever know." Jonah later told me this was the moment he stopped feeling guilty. It's not angry. Not triumphant. Just finished. Because she had not said, "I didn't create the problem." She had said, "You're making it look like I did." Priya came out of the repair area and asked whether everything was okay. Mom smiled instantly. "Perfect. I'm just proud of my grandson." She left the check on the counter. Jonah tore it in half after his shift and put both pieces in the envelope. He did not mail it back. He handed it to me. You decide. I put it in a drawer. Not as evidence. As a reminder that money offered with conditions is not always help. The next piece arrived from someone I never expected. Gloria Dunn had been my mother's friend for almost 30 years. They met when both were volunteering at a museum fundraiser. Gloria was the kind of woman who brought real china to a church potluck and remembered everyone's allergies. She called me on a Thursday morning. I need to ask you something, she said. Is Lorraine telling the truth about Jonah? My whole body tightened. What is she saying? That he promised to watch Tessa's children and then refused because his friends pressured him into the canoe trip. No. A long pause. I didn't think so. Why? Because she told me something different before any of this happened. I sat down. Gloria continued carefully. Dana, I don't enjoy being pulled into family business. I understand. But I enjoy being used as an audience even less. She sent me 3 screenshots. They were from a text exchange between her and Mom, dated April 10th, the day after the nature program reservation had been canceled. The first message was ordinary. Mom complained that Tessa was taking on too much. The second made my throat tighten. Mom wrote that Tessa needed to stop believing paid programs and coworkers could replace family. Gloria had replied that the children already had a program for the training week. Mom answered, "Not anymore. I cleared that complication yesterday." The final screenshot was worse. Gloria had asked what that meant. Mom replied, "It means when June comes, they will have to work together instead of scattering in every direction. Sometimes you have to remove the easy exit before people remember they belong to each other." I read that sentence until the words lost shape. There was no panic. No last-minute mistake. No confused grandmother trying to help. April 10th. She had removed the childcare option more than 2 months before Tessa's training. Then she had told Tessa that Jonah volunteered. Then she had told the family he withdrew. She had built a moral test whose answer she had already decided. "Why are you sending this now?" I asked Gloria. Her voice became quieter. "Because yesterday she told me you and Tessa were unstable, and she might have to step in with the children." I went cold. "What children?" "Ren and Caleb." "She is not their parent." "I know." What did she mean by step in? She didn't say, maybe nothing. But Dana, she sounded, pleased with how necessary she thought she was becoming. I thanked Gloria. Then I called Tessa. She came to my house that evening without the kids. We sat at the dining table with Grant and spread everything out. The Nature Center's account log. The note from Nina about Mom telling her childcare was handled. The screenshots from Gloria. Jonah's message from early May. My legal pad. His green notebook. For the first time, the pattern existed outside our memories. Tessa covered her mouth with both hands. I cried in front of her. I knew exactly what she meant. After the nature program supposedly fell through, Tessa had spent weeks panicking about how to attend the certification course. Mom had listened, comforted her, told her not to worry, told her family always found a way. She knew why I was panicking, Tessa said. She created it. Grant said nothing. I reached for my sister's hand. She pulled away. Not from me. From everyone. She stood and walked into the kitchen. I need a minute. I followed. She gripped the edge of the counter. I want to call her right now. So do I. I want her to explain it. She won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Tessa turned on me. You always do this. You decide how everyone is going to react before they react. The accusation was fair enough to sting. I nodded. You're right. That stopped her. I continued. Call her if you need to. I'm not going to tell you how to handle her anymore. Tessa stared at me. Then she started crying. Not dramatically. Just exhausted tears. I don't know how to have a mother if I can't trust what she tells me. I had no answer. So I said the only true thing I had. Neither do I. We did not call Mom that night. Instead, Tessa and I made a rule. No confronting her until after Jonah's graduation ceremony. For once, his milestone would not become the stage for our family crisis. I wish I could tell you we succeeded. Mom had other plans. Graduation was Friday evening. Mom came despite having threatened not to, applauded Jonah loudly, and afterward tried to pull him into a private conversation. No, Grandma, he said. You owe me that much. I don't think I do. When she looked at me for intervention, I said, he answered you. Tessa stepped beside us. We're answering for ourselves now. Mom left with the expression of someone who believed independence was a personal attack. Jonah's graduation cookout was the next afternoon, and Mom had already RSVP'd yes. The cookout was at a county park beside Lake Mendota, not our house. That mattered later. There were picnic tables, a rented shelter, Jonah's friends, Grant's co-workers, people from my hospital, Tessa's children, neighbors, and enough food to feed a marching band. For the first hour, Mom behaved beautifully. Then Grant asked everyone to gather for cake. Mom stood before he could speak. She held up her glass and said she wanted to toast her grandson. The first half was warm. She talked about Jonah learning to ride a bike, his first school science fair, the way my father would have loved seeing him graduate. Then she turned. I only hope, she said, smiling at the crowd, that college teaches him success means very little if the people who love you cannot depend on you. The shelter went quiet. Mom continued. She mentioned Tessa's children. She mentioned promises. She never directly said Jonah had broken one, but she built the sentence so everyone else would. I felt my old instinct rise. Smooth it over. Protect her dignity. Get through the party. Then Tessa stood beside me. No, she said. Mom blinked. Tessa's voice shook, but she kept going. Jonah never promised me anything. Mom told me he did. She also canceled the childcare I already had. Someone near the cake inhaled sharply. Mom's face emptied. Tessa, This is neither the time nor the place. You made it the place. I looked at Jonah. He was pale but steady. And for once, I did not step in front of him. Mom turned toward me. Are you going to allow this? That question finished something in me. I don't control her, I said, and I don't control Jonah. You have poisoned them against me. No, we compared notes. Her mouth tightened. I took out my phone. I have the cancellation record. I have Gloria's messages. I know what you did. For 1 second, real fear crossed her face. Then it vanished. You have no idea what I have done to keep this family connected. I know enough. I gave you everything. You gave us love, I said, and then you kept attaching conditions to it. Her eyes filled. People shifted uncomfortably. I hated that she was humiliated. I hated that part of me. Still wanted to rescue her from the consequences of a scene she had started. Then she pressed a hand to her chest. Her breathing changed. She reached for the picnic table. Dana, she whispered, I can't. Every nerve in my body fired. For 20 years, that sound had moved my feet before my thoughts. This time I did not diagnose her. I did not negotiate. I did not drive her anywhere. I called 911. Mom stared at me. I don't need an ambulance. You said you can't breathe. We're treating that as real. Her hand dropped slightly. Dana, don't make a spectacle. I'm not. I'm taking you seriously. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked her oxygen, pulse, blood pressure, heart rhythm. Mom answered questions with increasing irritation. When they recommended transport for further evaluation, she refused. She signed the refusal form. Then she looked at me as though I had betrayed her. I understood the expression at last. She had expected private rescue. Instead, she had received ordinary emergency procedure. No special access, no abandoned celebration, no daughter trapped alone beside her for 6 hours. Just professionals, documentation, and a choice. She left without saying goodbye. The next morning, Jonah climbed into a friend's SUV with 2 dry bags, a paddle, and the route he had spent 2 years building. Before he left, he hugged me. You okay? I laughed because, of course, he was still checking on me. I'm learning. He nodded. Then he went. That afternoon, Tessa and I sent Mom one joint message. We would have no contact for 90 days, no relatives carrying messages, no medical calls to me, emergencies went to 911, no access to Tessa's childcare accounts, no surprise visits. After 90 days, we would decide separately whether contact could resume. Mom responded with 4 words. You will regret this. I expected guilt to flatten me. Instead, grief came first. I grieved the mother I had, the mother I wanted, and the years I had spent confusing immediate response with devotion. But the silence that followed was not empty. Tessa got her certification. The childcare patchwork worked because 6 different people helped without turning that help into ownership. Jonah completed the canoe route. At his scholarship interview, the panel asked what had been hardest about the project. He told them planning the route was easier than protecting it, once other people decided his time belonged to them. In July, he received the scholarship. Not because he defeated his grandmother, because he finished what he started. When the 90 days ended, Mom asked for contact again. Tessa chose monthly lunches in public. I chose phone calls first. Jonah chose none. That was the hardest boundary for Mom to accept. It was also the one I refused to negotiate for him. A year later, our family looks smaller from the outside and larger from within. Tessa calls me directly. Grant no longer watches my face whenever my phone rings. Jonah comes home from college with laundry, impossible stories, and the calm certainty of someone who learned young that kindness does not require surrender. Mom is still Mom. Sometimes she apologizes around the edges. Sometimes she rewrites history. Sometimes I end the call. I no longer need her to agree with my version of events for me to trust it. That may be the biggest change. I used to think family loyalty meant being available whenever someone reached for you. Now I think loyalty without consent is only control wearing familiar clothes. The people I call family today are the ones who can hear no without turning love into punishment. Some share my blood. Some don't. All of them know the door opens both ways. If this story reminds you of someone who keeps creating emergencies so they can stay at the center of your life, remember this. You are allowed to take a crisis seriously without handing over your freedom. You are allowed to help without becoming owned by the help. And you are allowed to build a family around truth, reciprocity, and peace. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next episode.